it's connected to the Old Testament word in definition of the New Testament to the word kabod, which means glory. And the emphasis of the word is weight, honor, glory, and reputation. And so it's or heaviness. The reason why we chose the name Doxa is because the word for glory has two facets to it. Number one, it's an attribute of the living God. Number two, it has a verbal aspect in relation to our disposition towards God. We glorify Him in that form, and so we wanted to be able to capture both of those, our responsibility and who God is. As people began to see from their perspective an urban church doing a fusion of jazz, gospel, soul, neo-soul, R&B, and even sometimes CCM, and merging some of that stuff together and writing and creating and even adapting songs. It's been kind of like a firestorm of people all over the world asking, you know, do you all have any music available? Where can we access that? And then also a lot of church plants are in need of just guidance, especially those who plant in urban contexts. I mean, the motivation for doing an album is basically to make the music available, and that there are churches in urban contexts that do theologically rich, gospel-centered, contextual, Christ-centered worship that glorifies God. And so I think to provide outlets for others to be able to do the same thing as it relates to God gracing us to be able to share the music with a lot of people, but also even people at the church are always saying, I want this at home and I want to be able to worship, you know, outside of the gathering, and I want to know these songs more deeply, and I want to use it in my own devotional time, and then ultimately as an aroma and a fragrance to God. The philosophy behind Doxa's music is we wanted music that was theologically rich, meaning that it had content. Some of our songs will have repetition every now and then, but it'll have repetitious depth. Okay, so we wanted to have theological richness and depth, and to reflect a really robust sense of the scriptures. Number two, it's Jesus exalting. We wanted the centrality of who Christ is based on Colossians 1:15 through 23 to be seen in every facet of our worship experience. And so that was a big part of it. I think we say gospel-centered is because you know, the gospel, Christ, the cross of Christ and the resurrection of Christ, His sacrificial death and resurrection is the access that gives us the ability to worship God. And that's one of the other pieces of what our component of worship is, just congregational. And so with that being said, congregational worship has to be expressive. It can't be silent, everybody just silent. I mean, they take on that sometimes, but when I look in the scriptures, there's very little silent, expressive worship. The Bible calls for it, Psalm 34, and so many Psalms give invitation for worship. You can't read Psalm 100, Psalm 150. You can't read any of the 100s and think that, well, you can't look through the book of Acts. You can't look at Ephesians 5:19 and 20. You can't, you know, you can't look at Colossians chapter 3 and talk about worship being, you know, sort of non-expressive. And so if we're going to glorify God and gather together as the saints, we have to be willing to express that where we live and dwell, but then also our gatherings, which we're excited about.